Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I am coming back at you with another Wargaming and Miniature video. In this video, we're going to start our new O Group boot camp. And in this first video, we are going to basically just talk about what's to come in the O Group boot camp. It's going to be a number of videos highlighting each chapter and showing you what you can expect from the rules. I will be able to go over each individual rule on the table. So this is the last video you'll see my face. We'll go over the table with some miniatures and some dice and show you exactly what each rule means and how it pertains to the O Group rules. O Group's been around for about 4 years now, and I find that it's a very well written and laid out set of rules. It's very streamlined in the fact that it's not overwhelming, in that there's not too many rules, but a lot of the rules cover a lot of different subjects. So it's got like a broad scale of what it can cover without making too many different little individual rules. All right, now in today's first video, what I plan to do is just stay with the PDF on the screen and just go over the highlights and talk about what's to come. In future videos, we'll go to the table and do the miniatures and things like that. And what we'll probably do is 1 or 2 chapters per video. And with there being over 10 chapters, this might be a week-long event. So bear with me and let's get into it. All right, now O Group is written by David C.R. Brown, and it's based on a battalion-sized action. That's the way the rules are written, but it's easily converted to company-sized actions, as you might have seen in my company playtest. All right, so let's go on to past the intros. You can see the copyright there being 2020. It's sold at 2 Fat Lordies. So if that's a set of rules that you want to pick up, that's where you can go and grab it. All right, here's the table of contents. And you can see that just on this first page, there is 11 chapters. And then you have 25 chapters before we get into the play sheets. So I'm going to try to do multiple chapters, maybe 1 or 2 a day. So this is going to take a long time to get through this boot camp. It's going to be very comprehensive. I'm going to try to go over each rule, explain the rule with my understanding, and demonstrate the rule on the table. The first thing we're going to talk about is the introduction. We might talk about preparing for battle as well today. There we go. We got the introduction. The introduction basically says that it's a battalion-sized game, which means you're going to have 3 companies, and each company will have 3 platoons. And the maneuver element on the table is the platoon. The platoon will comprise of approximately 3 bases. So you're looking at maybe about each base representing a squad or a section. So you've got, so in the way I look at it, I would call that a squad-based game, right? Because the base is a squad. But no, because your army or your entire force is a battalion, they're calling it a battalion scale game. Now, O Group stands for Orders Group, and that's a British military term where senior NCOs and officers get together and they find out what their orders are. Like they tell them where they're attacking, how they're maneuvering, timing, support elements, all that good stuff. Uh, the It's kind of like in the U.S. Army, we have things called op orders, which is basically like an operations order to disseminate that information to your subordinates. All right, so chapter 1 talks about preparing for battle. Major point, bullet point, you'll see right here where it says O Group players field an infantry battalion with armor and gun supports basically attaching to the infantry battalion. That's not exactly 100% correct because you can, in future supplements, they explain how you could have battle groups. You could also have a mixed battalion, or you could even have an armored battalion. So it's really kind of, and they have an army. They have army lists, but they also offer, if you're designing a scenario, to use actual TONE of units that were there. Okay, so in the game, you're going to see like battalion headquarters. Like when I say what you'll see, I'm talking about the bases. You're going to see battalion headquarters. You're going to see company commanders. You're going to see the sections or squads grouped together into platoons. You're going to see support weapons like machine guns, bazookas, mortars. You're also going to see a few AFVs, armored fighting vehicles. You'll see reconnaissance vehicles. You might even see specialist infantry units like engineers or assault troops. You're going to see anti-tank guns, and that will determine this. Once you add all those together, that's going to determine the size of your battalion. But if you wanted to play even larger battles, you can do, there's a rule in section 23 called battle group where you can play with multiple battalions. Okay, so let's talk, I'm skipping tactical units. We kind of already went over that. Let's talk about basing. Well, there's no fixed base size. You can play with however you want to base your figures. If you want to do the Flames of War basing, you can do that. If you want to do a Spearhead or Command Decision basing, you can definitely do that. Now, what I do is I use small Flames of War bases as my sections, and I usually put 3 figures on there. And then I use a round base, a smaller round base, to represent the company commanders. And then I use a larger 2-inch round base to represent the combat patrols, which we'll get into in a future chapter. And then the support elements, I try to put them on the small base, but if they're a little bit larger than a small base, like a medium machine gun might be, depending on how the crew is set up, it might be too big for a small base. So then I'll put it on a specialized like 30 by 30 base. Anti-tank guns, depending on the size, will go on either medium or large. So it's really however you want to do it. The figures that you put on the base is also how you want to do it, because it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter in game terms what's on the base. If you have an infantry platoon and you're using 3 bases and you just put a bunch of guys with rifles on there, you're perfectly fine. But there is a unit that is all submachine guns, so I would avoid doing that. What I do is I intermix my Bren guns, my BARs, my 2-inch mortars, my rifles, my submachine guns. I put them all in a platoon as if whatever would normally be carried by a platoon. So if a platoon would have BARs or light machine guns, I'll put them on those bases as filler. So, I'll just fill out my bases with those support weapons. But those are not additional dedicated support weapons. Those are just part of the platoon. All right, so let's talk about scale. You can play this in any scale. It shows 20, 15, 12, 10, and 6 millimeter. but I've actually seen it played with 25 millimeter. So you can play it however you want, right? If you took two 25 millimeter figures and put them on a base and called that a section, and you made a bunch of platoons like that, that would be perfectly fine. That's irrelevant what scale of figure you use. When you use larger figures, your base size actually will have to grow. And what that usually means is your table size will also have to grow. They offer a range and distance option down here where they give you two numbers. They give you the first number, which is 15 millimeter or smaller, and then the second number, which is 20 millimeter or larger, just to give you that enhanced range, or, to cover a bigger table, things like that. Remember, one base represents a section of approximately 10 men, a squad, right? Where when you're talking about tanks or anti-tank guns, it also represents a section or half a platoon. So usually two vehicles represents a vehicle platoon. One model of a tank does not represent one tank on the table. One stand of infantry doesn't represent those three guys that you have mounted on that base. It represents 10 to 12 men. Now the ground scale in 15 millimeter, it doesn't really matter. It's not something that's in consideration, but when the game designer put the rules together, he had 25 yards in mind for per inch. And then a game turn represents anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. It's a very fast-paced, boom, boom, boom game. You're not playing 30-minute turns or hour turns. These things are only 2 minutes long. So but it says 2 to 10 because it's not a time-based game, and things happen with both players during a turn, and they also have both players act every phase. So you might have a phasing player, but your opponent can react to what you're doing. So basically, you're both acting during the same turn. Okay, so equipment. Really, all you need are 6-sided dice. It says 10 6-sided dice, which I would say have more than that, because you have a battalion headquarters, which should hold a die showing you how many battalion orders you have, and because you can save it from turn to turn. And then there's also like a spotting die that you might want to have. I would use an alternate color to when you roll your attacks, various different things. So just have a handful of dice and you should be good. There's markers that you're going to need for your game. Primarily, the main marker you're going to need is something called shock. Is basically like a penalty applied to your unit. So like when a platoon gets shot and it takes a shock, you would just place a shock marker down. And it could hold up to 2 shock, but the third shock is also a shock, but it's called suppression. So you might want to have like shock markers and then maybe a special suppression marker. There are some tokens out there that are 3-sided, and one will have a 1 shock, another one will have a 2 shock, and the third one will say suppression. Or you could just mark it with 3 shock. You could use glass beads or pin markers from Bolt Action. You can use little token counters. You can use whatever you what do they call those things? Pipe cleaners. You can use whatever you need to use to represent how many shock is on a platoon. And if you have 3, you just know that you're suppressed. And of course, damage markers. Now, the only thing that gets damaged per se is armored fighting vehicles. Infantry don't get damaged. They get either shock or eliminated, like you just pick a base up. Now, according to this, it says suppressed units can also be represented by an addition of casualty figure next to the unit. So if you've got like dead soldiers or like a soldier with his head blown off or something like that, and you put it on a marker, You can lay that down next to your troops. It's just whatever you want to use. And also you will need 9 combat patrols. Combat patrols are 2-inch discs. They are effectively tokens. They're not units. But I personally make these 2-inch discs, and I put a few figures on there to give it like a 3-dimensional, looks like a patrol sneaking out or whatever, making it a 3-dimensional. It doesn't, basically effectively doesn't take away your immersion from the table. If you have too many tokens or markers on the table, it takes away from the look. So I make my tokens, my combat patrols, with little figures on them, and that's why they recommend your shock or suppression be little casualty figures. That might be going a little too far. That's up to you. Okay, now casualties and figure removal, we kind of slowly went over that. You don't remove individual figures. It's not like bolt action or battle group where individuals die. This is a base dies. A lot, it's a whole figure base gets removed. And usually you only take shock, which greatly reduces your ability to function and eventually suppresses you. But if you go beyond suppression, there's a chance that a section can be KIA'd, and that's when you actually pull the figure off the table. If it's a vehicle, you just mark it with damage markers and leave the wreck on the table. And that's where we're going to end the video today. I just wanted to get the initial video out of the way, letting you know what's coming in the very near future on my channel. Follow this boot camp. I'll have a playlist set up, and I'll gradually be uploading the chapters into that boot camp. But the next video is going to be talking about the battalion. Basically, I'm going to show figures. I'm going to show what each element might look like on the table, and then how to organize your battalion and different types of platoons. And then we'll go into troop ratings immediately after that, and that'll be in the next video. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out and watching this introduction to our O Group boot camp. I look forward to having you follow us along in our journey. There are a number of other streamers out there that have put out various videos about O Group, either battle reports or rules updates or figure highlights or whatever. You should check them all out, because there's a lot of good information out there. I've watched a lot of them myself. Thank you for coming out, and I want to let you know that I do have an eBay store. So if you go to eBay, go to this link right here, and you'll be able to shop for like 15mm or 28mm models. I do not have the O Group rules on my site. You should go check that out at Two Fat Lardies. And if you have miniatures that need to be painted, make sure you contact me at my email address, and I would be glad to start a commission for you, and I'll give you my price sheet. All right, I'll catch you in the next one.